There is a moment every entrepreneur experiences where you find yourself in a bit of a sticky situation, but you're not exactly sure whether you're meant to push through it, pause and wait, or walk away completely. Is it resistance? Is it burnout? Or is a little something called divine delay? Today, we are breaking down these three invisible forces that every powerful woman in business will meet on her path, probably multiple times. There is the fear-based friction of resistance, the soul deep depletion of burnout, and then the sacred strategic pause of divine delay. Which is which? How do you know? Because unfortunately, they can be feeling very similar. But when you are able to discern the difference between all of them, you stop second guessing yourself, you stop spiraling in confusion, and you start moving or not moving from a place of deep trust, self-leadership, and divine timing. So this episode is going to help you know exactly what's really going on under the surface and how to honor it like the legend that you are. Let's get into it. Welcome to All In with Allie, the podcast for online business owners and entrepreneurs who are ready to create the life and business of their dreams. I am so happy you are here. I decided to do this podcast for two reasons. First and foremost, I was feeling major resistance in recording this, and we'll get into why. And also, this is something that, per usual, has been a theme that's been coming up. And it's not very surprising. I work with highly ambitious women who are very practiced at the art of taking action, often big, bold actions and consistent actions. But when it comes to slowing down and honoring thyself, that's the part that we're a little bit more wobbly on. So this has been coming up for me and for a couple of my clients. And I thought, you know what better topic to discuss, because there's not one person listening to this that has not experienced this probably recently and probably will experience this by the end of the week. And in doing my research to put together a good episode for you, I came across this title, Divine Delay. This is the first time I've ever heard that phrase. And I've looked it up, like who coined it, and there wasn't one particular person, but there are stories of divine delay that go all the way back to the Bible, and we're going to talk about that. But I knew, resistance and burnout are kind of the negative ones, right? Those are the ones like what we're very familiar with, and we'll go deep into each and we'll define each, because I want you to be very clear so you know what you're feeling in your body. But I also knew there was a positive one too. And I look at divine delay as the positive one. It's like, okay, I'm feeling resistance. I'm experiencing resistance, but it's not because of fear. It just feels as if the universe is working against me to delay this thing that I'm working on. And I don't know why. But it always, when honored, in my experience anyway, works out for the greater good. And you see in hindsight, you're like, oh, okay, I kind of see why that needed to be delayed. And I have an example, a very, very recent example that I can give you of that as well. So I'm excited to talk about each of these because, like I said, I think as women, business owners, our superpower is our intuition. Everybody has intuition, whether you're a male or a female. But women especially, that's our thing. right? Whether you realize it or not, we have a level of attunement, and this can always be fine-tuned even more and sharpened even more and refined. But I think as women, we all have a higher sensitivity to our intuition and to what's happening within and around us. That's our gift. So this obviously is really helpful in reading rooms and in picking up on other people's energies, and also in figuring out what's happening within us. But when it comes to, let's look at resistance and divine delay, they feel very similar. I have experienced divine delay where I thought for sure it was resistance, and I thought for sure it was a me thing. But in hindsight, that wasn't the case at all. So if you aren't sure how to discern between these three, then what ends up happening, if you're like me, is you end up overthinking things to death. And as women who are running businesses, and that's not all we're doing here, right? We're also mothers, a lot of us, or spouses, or, we also have very rich lives. We don't need to be wasting our precious time and energy overthinking what the hell we are feeling in our bodies. The faster we can move with trust and with confidence, the more powerful our moves will be and the results that come from them. So my goal with this episode is to get us crystal clear on each of these so that the next time you feel either of them, you can identify it quickly and you can take a more aligned action and honor what's actually happening in your body or in your experience. Okay. So let's define each of these. Starting with resistance. Resistance is the invisible force that shows up anytime that you are about to grow, expand, or do something meaningful. Resistance is often sneaky. It will usually disguise itself as procrastination, perfectionism, self-doubt, fatigue, overthinking. This can also disguise itself as logic, like, well, I'm just being practical here. I'm being logical, but its real job, the real goal of resistance is to protect you from change. That is what resistance is for, because your nervous system, ego, or subconscious thinks that change equals danger. Now, as an entrepreneur and as a business owner, this is something we really need to start training our mind, our subconscious, is normal and is okay. And I think the longer you're in business, the more that your brain starts to kind of get the hang of this and probably waves the resistance flag a little less. But it's still going to come up, right? It still is going to hit you. And it really is very sneaky. I know I have clients that will often confuse resistance with burnout because, like I said, it can disguise itself as even fatigue. So they're like, wait, why don't I feel like doing this thing? I know that I should do this thing. I know that I want to do this thing, but my body, anytime I go to do this thing, feels physically exhausted. And when we break it down and we go deeper, we realize, okay, while that may be how you're physically feeling right now, where that's coming from is not actually burnout. And we'll get into how we were able to discern that because we're going to get into burnout in just a second. But it really does come from this deeper rooted fear of doing this new thing or this thing that's going to implement change into their experience. So to summarize resistance, it is fear dressed up as logic. It is your comfort zone throwing a temper tantrum. That is a quote from Michael V. Gissinger. Thank you, Google, for telling me that. But I thought that that was a really interesting way to put it. Fear dressed up as logic, your comfort zone throwing a temper tantrum. That is resistance. And if you have felt resistance, which we all have, that's so accurate, right? It's like, why when I sit down to do this thing, all of a sudden, it's like the last thing on my to-do list that I would ever want to do. All of a sudden, I have a serious interest in organizing my socks, or all of a sudden, I can't stop scrolling social media, or all of a sudden, I am hyper fixated on this one little detail that means absolutely nothing to the grander scheme of the project itself. It's resistance. It is slowing you down, keeping you safe. This stems from the fear of unknown and the fear of change. So that's resistance. We've all been there, done that. Now, burnout. Again, all of these feel very similar in some ways. Burnout, though, is something to be very cautious of. And I don't think everybody has actually experienced burnout. I think burnout is one of those buzzwords that gets used a lot and thrown out a lot. But I don't think it's as common as maybe people make it seem. But it is subjective. You know, it's going to look different for everybody. But what I've found is a lot of people do get resistance confused with burnout, or just a moment of exhaustion, a period, maybe you need a nap, right? You're not burnt out. You just need to stop going to bed at 2 a.m. and waking up super early and running yourself ragged. You're on the brink of burnout. You're on the way to burnout, but you're not burnout yet. So what burnout is the crash after running on hustle fumes and or people pleasing and or pressure and or productivity, typically as a form of worthiness. So burnout typically comes after all of this action for an extended period. And I want you to notice that it said after running on fumes, right? Like this is, you've pushed yourself past the point of exhaustion. That's when we get into burnout. We've bypassed all of our bodily red flags, right? We've bypassed all of our body's warning signs, all for what? To be productive, to finish a project. And typically this comes from some sort of worthiness that we're getting out of being productive, or maybe even scarcity, that if you don't get this thing done by a certain time, or if you don't hit this metric by this certain time, then something very bad is going to happen, or it's going to mean something negative about you. So it's not just being tired. It's being completely disconnected, right? From joy, from purpose, from energy, from the reason that you started your business and what it is that you do in the first place. So burnout begins as your body whispering, hey, slow down, right? It might throw a little cold at you. It might throw, an afternoon where you feel like you need a little bit more caffeine or whatever. But you're going to get these whispers, and then it's going to turn into full-blown yelling and screaming at you and manifest into maybe a more serious illness, or, it could look like so many different, or just pure exhaustion for a lot of people. Or even, and to me, this goes hand in hand with exhaustion, but like Sam Keen says this beautifully, and this is, I have experienced burnout, and this is what it feels like. Sam Keen is quoted in saying, burnout is nature's way of telling you you've been going through the motions, but your soul has departed. You've kind of gone into zombie mode, and that's so accurate for me. It's like, yeah, you're doing the thing, but there's nobody behind the door anymore, right? It's just like muscle memory. And it's because your soul's like, deuces. This is not what we signed up for. This is not worth it. And also the reasons why you're doing this is not out of the love of the game or whatever. This is like so not healthy in terms of the worthiness that you're attaching to this. It's not necessary or true at all. So Burnout is what happens when you've been doing too much of what drains you often and not enough of what fuels you. You're just doing too much for too long and you're not paying attention to those warning signs. You will get warning signs and signals from your body, from those who love you before you reach burnout. Most people push through due to scarcity around, if they don't do it, what does that mean about them? Maybe a limiting belief, again, that if they don't hit this metric or hit this goal by this time, body be damned, nervous system be damned, that means something about them. They're not good enough. They're not cut out for whatever. This is basically an overuse of masculine energy, a complete and utter imbalance. We are designed, all of us humans have masculine and feminine energies. We are meant to do and then to be. We are meant to do and then to receive, to put out and to take in, to exhale and to inhale. Burnout comes from constant exhaling, right? Like if you only breathe out, you die. So you really have to be careful with burnout. Burnout can ruin whole careers. It can ruin relationships. We could go on and on. So if you have experienced burnout, you know this very well. But I think what most people have experienced are warnings of burnout. And that's when we really pay attention to what our body and our soul is signaling to us. And we listen and we honor it. And we check those limiting beliefs and voices of scarcity at the door. Are these ultimately true? Does it really mean I'm not worthy if this thing doesn't get done? Does it really mean that this terrible thing is going to happen if I don't do this at this very specific time? The answer is always no. The answer is no. Now, there's going to, this goes without being said, but there's going to be seasons where you have certain projects or whatever, but that level of hustle to maybe finish a project, it's not sustainable. So I have seasons of hustle. I feel like every business owner, every human has a season of hustle, but especially as business owners, there are going to be those seasons where you're pushing it. You're pushing it to a limit, but you just have to know that there is a limit. Right? That level of pushing is not sustainable. And I'm going to give you an example. Well, I'll give you this example right now, actually, while we're talking about it. So I just completed a challenge called the Die Hard Client Attraction Challenge. I had not done a challenge in quite a while. And the way that this challenge came to be, and we'll get into this here in a minute, is actually thanks to divine delay. So we'll talk about that because it's a perfect example for you. But we'll skip ahead to the part that I did the challenge. And then the challenge led into the launch that I'm currently in right now. We are currently launching the Cult Brand Accelerator. I will put the link for you. If you're listening to this in real time, there's still time to join. So I'll put that link. 2 major offers I'm very proud of. And in the weeks, I would say like the week and a half leading up to the challenge, the week of the challenge up until now, which is like about a week and a half after, it's been hustle mode for me. This is the first time I've ever done this particular challenge before. It is the first time that I did this particular sharing of information this way. And it was 5 days of it. I'm talking like 6 hours of content that I created in real time for this, and workbooks and, managing the whole experience, launching the thing, selling the thing. I do have a team, but this whole experience showed me that I need even more support. So there was such a gift in that. But I would say once I got done with the challenge portion, I was feeling it, right? Like it was certainly a push season, a push period of time where there was just what that feels like for me is it's a lot of doing, right? It's a lot of creating. It's a lot of birthing and putting out and showing up and being seen and being communicative and available and, way more out there than I typically am with a group of over 100 women. So I got to the end, I was like, oh my gosh, first of all, it was an incredible experience. Thank God I did that, but I am tired. And that was just the pre-launch of Cult Brand. So then we go into a whole full launch. So, I took the weekend and I've been very mindful because I've learned by now that it is in these moments when you start feeling that way that your self-care and balance of that masculine energy is the utmost importance, because if you push it too far, that's when you do get sick. That's when you do start making mistakes, or you start taking misaligned actions in your business, or end up sabotaging the whole thing. And I've been there and I've done that. I've done it the wrong way. But, I'm getting to the end of this launch and it's like, okay, we're breathing. We got through that. That was amazing. But I'm seeing if I want to do more of those, there has to be a different way. I have to bring on more support. Otherwise, I'm only going to be able to do a couple of those a year. It's simply not sustainable. And if I had pushed through that, or if I had gone from that to then another live launch situation, there ain't no way, right? I could have physically done it. I could probably do 3 or 4 in a row, but by the end I would be full, soul would have been completely out of the body at that point. So that is, to me, what signs of burnout looks like. It starts as just that depletion, and it can be a positive depletion, but also it's what it's also like? Really hard workouts. Really hard workouts are very helpful and impactful. They're a positive thing until you push them too far, until you do too many of them, right? It's everything in moderation. So I look at these launch situations as seasons of intense workouts, but then you need to have the season after where you do some stretching and you do some yoga and you take some breaks and you eat a little bit of junk food and you balance it back out before you go right back into it. Otherwise, you are just fully depleting yourself. Okay. So that is burnout. And then, we've talked about resistance, but while resistance comes from a fear and ego trying to keep you small, now we have divine delay. Divine delay comes from your higher self or inner knowing asking you to move with intention, clarity, and power minus the speed. Feel me? Okay. So we have resistance, which is the fear of the unknown that manifests as procrastination and perfectionism and all the things. We have burnout, which is where you're just taking it too far, too much, too far. You're overriding all the signs and the signals. And then there's divine delay, which is where you get this inner knowing, or in my experience, it could even be an outer body situation, right? It almost feels like the universe is conspiring to slow you down so that you move with more intention, you move with more clarity, more power, but maybe not so damn fast. So it's not procrastination, it's preparation. It's not fear, it's alignment recalibrating. It's not avoidance, it's sacred timing working itself out. Big differences between those things, right? So this is why it's so important that we know how to discern between these, because otherwise, if divine delay is taking place, but you're reading it as procrastination or you're reading it as fear and it's not really that at all, and you push through it, well, then you probably are limiting yourself from what you can receive because it's simply not the right time, or you're not moving with a level of confidence, power and clarity that you could be, which would get you a totally different result. So, in short, divine delay is the pause that protects your purpose. Isn't that beautiful? It is the pause that protects your purpose. It's the space between the spark and the strike, the incubation before the ignition. Okay? So resistance feels anxious, restless, heavy. It's like, oh, you know what I always describe resistance as? You've heard me say this before. Resistance feels like walking through mud. I may know where I'm going. I'm not lost. But every step I take feels like I'm walking through freaking mud. That's what resistance feels like. Divine delay feels more quiet and reflective. It's more like you can miss it for sure. So resistance kind of slows you down and pulls you down. Divine delay is simply like, can we go deeper here? Is there something else? Let's wait. Let's think. Let's discern. Let's refine. So those waiting periods can lead to a higher purpose and leading again to outcomes that are more aligned and more closely aligned to what it is that you actually want to create. So, this is a form of divine intervention, which is so magical. So let me tell you this story in the Bible that is an example of divine delay. So this is a story of Lazarus, John 11. And this is the story. So Lazarus was a close friend of Jesus. He got very ill, and his sisters Mary and Martha sent word to Jesus and basically said, hey, he's dying. You need to get here like yesterday, which we know Jesus could have done if he wanted to. But the interesting thing that he did instead was he deliberately waits 2 more days before heading to Lazarus. By the time Jesus got there, Lazarus had been dead and he was already buried or in his tomb. Everybody was devastated. And they were just like, if you had been here, if you had come when we told you to, he would not have died. So it looks like in the moment, a tragic delay. It looks like in the moment that Jesus did not care. It looks in the moment like an unanswered prayer. But then Jesus walks to the tomb and basically he raises Lazarus from the dead. So the breakdown here is the delay in the moment felt wrong. Why? Because we think from our humanly perspective that we know what the right moves are. We think from our very limited 3D perspective, it makes the most sense and it would be the highest good and for the highest good of all if you did this thing right now at this time. This is what needs to happen. Make this happen. So the delay felt wrong because that's not what happened. He did not come when they asked him to. It was painful. It was confusing. It felt like he was too late. But the delay had purpose because it wasn't to prevent a sickness. It was to demonstrate the power of resurrection. The miracle that ended up happening because of the divine delay was so much bigger and greater, 10 times, 100 times, exponentially greater than what would have happened had he had done what they asked him to, right? It's pretty cool to heal somebody from an illness. It's a whole other thing to be resurrected from the dead. So healing would have been impressive. Resurrection is unforgettable. So the spiritual truth of that is that God was not late. He was simply setting the stage. The delay wasn't denial. It was divine. It was written all along. So again, as business owners, we often are thinking 5, 10, 20 steps ahead. That's what makes a really powerful business owner, is having the power of foresight and thinking far ahead. But you also have to have a level of trust in the unknown. Otherwise, you no doubt are limiting yourself. And I experienced this again with this challenge. So before I had the idea to do the challenge, I originally was going to do a basic ass masterclass. And I love a basic ass masterclass. I do them here and there. But I was going to, I'd started really obsessing over the idea of cult brands. I knew it would be a very powerful idea to bring to you. I believe not everybody is meant to create a cult brand, but if you are, you should, because why would you build a basic brand when you can build a cult brand? So I'd already began the process of obsessing over this. And by the way, this is what the Cult Brand Accelerator is. It's 8 weeks where I take you from where you are now and turn you into a cult brand in 8 freaking weeks. So again, we'll link that in the show notes. But before I had the idea to do the challenge, I was like, I think I'm just going to do this in a masterclass. So I would have had to brought you around to the whole concept of cult brand, what it is, why it's important, what that looks like in about an hour, 90 minutes max. And then invited whomever was on board into the accelerator. I was like, okay, that makes sense to me. Let's go, right? So this was a good, probably 2 months ago. And I had plans to launch this well over a month ago, well over. But every time I sat down, it was like the amount of resistance I felt in my body, not to mention, not only that, but also there were these other things that I really needed to also happen at the same time for this to make sense. So one of those things, just as an example, I'm redoing my website, and this has turned into a bit longer of a process than originally planned, which is totally fine. But at the time, the person who was doing my website, she was unavailable for, a specific reason. And it was delaying everything that I needed to do. So I wanted to do this masterclass, but I needed support on the website end. So until I got that support, I couldn't move forward with master. I could have, but to me, it just would not have made sense. And it would have felt like a waste of a launch. And I'm not about that life. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. And it just would have felt incomplete. So that was just one example of something outside of me that felt as if it was just delay. And when I tell you 1 week turned into 2 weeks, turned into 3 weeks, and I'm like, what is happening? And I'm like ready to launch something. I'm excited to launch something. I don't want this moment to pass. And I knew I had the discernment, and I know myself enough, and I know sabotage enough, and I know resistance well enough to check in and be like, is this a me thing? Am I, for some reason, scared to talk about cult brands? The answer was hell no. Am I scared to do a masterclass? No, I've done a million of them. Is there something on the other side of this that I'm like trying to avoid? No. What the hell is going on? It didn't make sense. Long story short, finally gets to the point where I've got ducks in a row. It's time to move on this thing. But right before I go to move on this thing, my brand new copywriter, who I had just hired about the time that I wanted to do this masterclass, she helps me with like launch emails and stuff like that. She doesn't write my words, but she helps me make sure emails are getting out, which is what I need desperately. But she came up to me. She was like, hey, my coach just did this challenge and it worked really well for him. I want to send you some information on it because I feel like it could work really well for you. And I was like, first of all, that's so thoughtful. Second of all, I've done a challenge before. Do I really have the energy to do a challenge? Like, that's the whole thing. It's like, it goes from a masterclass is a 1 day situation. A challenge, you're looking at a full ass week. And I was like, oh God, do I have it in me to do a fucking challenge? I don't know. But I look and I see like what she sent me. And by the end of looking at this guy's challenge and what he did and his results, now I'm getting ideas. Now I'm like, wait a second. The idea and concept of cult brand, we need more time. Okay. First of all, people don't touch the word cult with a 10-foot pole in our industry. And here I am trying to talk you into to be a cult brand in an hour, and I'm like, oh, okay. Maybe we need a little bit more of a runway here to work with. And now I'm getting to that and I'm like, oh shit, maybe I should do a challenge. And then she had one other tip for me. And I'm going to be so real with you. I was triggered when she said this to me. Picture this. We're sitting on this call, right? It's first thing in the morning. I'm very excited. I'm like, look, this is what I want to do. Here's my idea. I had taken my idea for the masterclass, broke it down into challenge. It's fire, right? And it was going to be called like the cult brand challenge, something like that. And she looked at me dead in my face with the most blank, dry expression. And she was like, don't call it that. And I was like, pardonnez-moi? Excuse me? She was like, you need a different title. I was like, wait a second. First of all, that's my job. I know titles. And if you've ever worked with me, that's my thing, right? That is my thing. And I was like, oh, what do you mean? That's like, I get it. It's polarizing for sure. But like, I like that about it. She was like, and she just looked at me. She was like, okay. And she was like, gotta go. And I was like, what the so I get off this call and I'm triggered. And I'm just like, this bitch, she doesn't know. She doesn't get me. She doesn't get my vision, right? Like total ego psychopath. Just like, whatever, just losing my mind over here. I was like, she just doesn't get it. Throwing a total temper tantrum. Chris walks in. I was like, you are not going to believe this. I gave her this idea and she looked at me and she told me that I shouldn't title it. And he looks at me and he was like, that's good. I was like, what do you mean that's good? He was like, you need people to tell you no. You need people to tell you when your ideas are bad. He was like, you don't want people. He said, I'm not saying your idea is bad. He said, but you want people on your team who are willing to be honest with you and give you honest feedback based on their experience. Are they always going to be right? No, but it's good that she feels comfortable with you to give you that honest feedback. And then I felt like an asshole. I was like, well, shit, whatever. You're right. I was so annoyed. So I was like, okay. I delete the email where I was going to fire her. Just kidding. I was not going to fire her. But I was like, okay, he's right. He's right. When he's right, he's right. Okay. I can own that. I can own it. So I was like, okay, fine. She sends me a follow-up email. This is my copywriter. And she said, hey, here's a suggestion for the title. So she completely ignores me. And she's like, here's a suggestion. When I tell you her suggestion was the Die Hard Client Attraction Challenge. If you're familiar, that's exactly what I used. Because I saw that suggestion, I was like, you know what? That's actually damn good. And also, that's following the marketing 101 principle of sell them what they want, give them what they need. They don't know if they want a cult brand yet. They don't even know what a cult brand is. Why the frick would I name it cult brand? It's like, duh, I know these things. I was like, you know what? That's damn good. And I was like, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to roll the dice. Okay. So I went with it. And the experience was a home run. The whole thing from start to finish. Once we got that ball rolling, it took a minute to get the ball rolling. But once we got that damn ball rolling, it didn't stop. And we had an incredible pre-launch. 15 women bought. I converted about 15% of the room into a high ticket offer, which is good. So all of that to say, I feel certain in my body that had I have forced myself to move 2 months ago on the masterclass idea with the original title and my original process of thinking about this, I can say without a shadow of a doubt, I probably would have converted a fraction of what I ended up converting. It would have been a fraction of the experience. It could not have been better. I mean, it could have converted better for sure. And, we'll work on it. But the whole experience was 5 days of magic, 6 days if you count the VIP day. All because I experienced what I initially thought was resistance and a lot of divine intervention that kept me pushing it back, because it just wasn't the right time. It just wasn't. And I knew in my soul, if I had forced it, which I could have done, which I've done plenty of other times, it would not have been the right time and the right experience. But then when you know, you fucking know. When you get that green light, you know, and then you go for it. So that is one experience of divine delay. It is so real. So to summarize all of this, here's how I want you to think about it. So you can discern a lot more fast and you can honor where you are and move more powerfully. Resistance feels like a lack of focus, procrastination, perfectionism, and or self-doubt. It typically comes up when you are doing something new, something that you know you want to do, something that you know will be good for you, but it is something that for sure is going to take you out of your comfort zone. So then you manifest all these things that slow you down. Burnout is full depletion, a lack of joy, enjoyment across the board. It usually follows after a busier season when you likely abandoned your body's nudges or maybe even demands for rest and balance. And then divine delay is an inner nudge or maybe even outside forces that seem to delay the process of what you want to happen. It could appear as resistance, but doesn't really make sense why it's happening, right? I first thought it was resistance, but I was like, I'm seasoned. I know what I'm doing. I'm not scared of this. Why is this happening? But the dots connect in hindsight. They connect in hindsight. Okay? So I hope this was helpful for you. If you are experiencing any of these, I am sending you all of the love. You know, and I think too, just to validate you, you know. And if you can quiet yourself and just take a step back and ask, is this resistance or is this divine delay? Is this a period of simply being uncomfortable and scared of something new, or am I burning myself out? You will get an answer. You know. It's when we're moving too fast and we're too quote unquote busy and there's too much noise that knowing gets drowned out. And then it gets very confusing for us. But when you can discern these things, you can trust. And I fully believe God is never going to put a situation in your life to slow you down for your detriment. Ever. Even if in the moment, that's what it looks like is happening. Okay. I hope this was helpful. If so, I would love if you screenshot and shared it in your stories. I would love if you left us a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you listen. That really is so helpful. But more than anything, I would love if you started to pay attention to the inner nudges and knowings of thy soul queen. I love you, and I will see you here next week. Bye.